Hi, welcome to Sriram's IAS. I am Kavita. In this lecture, we shall be discussing an interesting topic called rural cosmopolitanism. Before we begin our lecture, I would like to give you some important information that the comprehensive batch on Anthropology Optional on Sriram IAS on Unacademy platform will begin on 17th of July. So the teachers will be myself Kavita and Tirumurugan sir. So in case you have not enrolled for the lecture for this complete comprehensive course on anthropology, you can do so now. Also, we have a mission 1 year for UPSC Civil Services Examination 2024. That is a comprehensive batch for UPSC Civil Services Examination 2024 wherein 100% syllabus of the UPSC examination including the preliminary examination, main examination and the interview part. All of this, that is 100% syllabus of UPSC, will be covered in an integrated manner by the top educators in the country. So you can enroll for this general studies course as well. So if you have not enrolled for any of these courses, this is the right time for you to enroll. So now coming to our lecture on rural cosmopolitanism. So in our paper 2 anthropology, we have this chapter on village studies wherein exclusively nowhere in the syllabus you will find this term called as rural cosmopolitanism mentioned over there. However, under village studies, this is a very important topic. Okay, so when we are doing a comprehensive batch on anthropology optional, we will be discussing all of these topics even though they have not been exclusively mentioned in the syllabus. So need not worry about any of that. And in today's lecture, we will be discussing one such interesting and important topic, rural cosmopolitanism. Got it? Okay. So, the concept of rural cosmopolitanism was propounded by Oscar Lewis. Okay. So, Oscar Lewis gave us the concept of rural cosmopolitanism when he did a comparative study of two villages. So, one village was in North India and the other village was in Mexico. So, what Oscar Lewis did is he did a comparative study of these two villages. So, the Indian village is Rani Kera, which is situated close to Delhi, and the Mexican village is a village by name Morelos, which is situated in Mexico. So what Oscar Lewis did was he took two villages, one Indian village and one Mexican village for his study. So he compared these two villages and he gave us this concept called as rural cosmopolitanism. Okay. So the concept of rural cosmopolitanism was given by or was propounded by Oscar Lewis in his comparative study of two villages, that is Rani Kera, which is an Indian village in North India, and Morelos, which is a Mexican village in Mexico. Okay, so now I will tell you what he meant by or what is this concept of rural cosmopolitanism. So, our earlier 19th century anthropologists like Henry Maine, Charles Metcalfe, and Baden Powell, they called Indian villages as autonomous units, as republics, as monolithic units. Okay, so the earlier 19th century anthropologists like Charles Metcalfe, Henry Maine, Baden Powell, they laid emphasis on the concept of village autonomy and they exaggerated this to such an extent that Charles Metcalfe went one step further and called Indian villages as little republics. Okay, so Charles Metcalfe went one step ahead of all these 19th century anthropologists and he said Indian villages are little republics. What did they mean by this? Okay, so They said that by saying Indian Republic, they called Indian villages as atomistic units, monolithic. They are totally independent. They are closed units which do not have any interactions with the nearby villages or towns or cities, and they are non-changing and they are self-sufficient units. Okay, so what the 19th century anthropologists told was the Indian villages are totally self-sufficient. They are atomistic units. They are monolithic. They do not have any interactions going on with the other nearby neighboring villages or towns or cities. Whatever the needs of the village are, they are capable of producing it and satisfying all their needs within the village. So there is hardly any interaction of a village with other nearby villages or towns and cities. That is why they call these Indian villages as little republics or monolithic units, atomistic units, or independent units. Okay, and they are non-changing and self-sufficient. Okay, so this was the view of the 19th century anthropologists about the Indian villages. However, that is what they said, that the Indian village was atomistic, self-sufficient and had least interactions with nearby other villages or towns or cities. However, this notion of village autonomy was broken down by the later anthropologists. They said that whatever the 19th century anthropologists propagated Indian villages as, that is entirely a false picture. Indian villages are not like that. They are not independent, they are not self-sufficient, they are not atomistic, monolithic. Okay. In fact, they said that Indian villages interact with at least nearly 400 other nearby villages or towns or cities. Okay, so Indian villages are connected to other nearby villages or towns or cities through various relations like marriage, caste, trade trade relationships, economic ties. Okay, like this, there are various pilgrimage, religious pilgrimage. Like this, through various reasons, the Indian villages are collected. They are connected to various other villages or nearby towns and cities. So, actually speaking, Indian villages are not little republics. They are not atomistic. They are not monolithic. Okay. So, this is what Oscar Lewis proved by his study. Okay. And he proved this by his study in which he compared the Indian village with the Mexican village, and he gave us the concept of rural cosmopolitanism. Okay. So, the Indian village was never self-sufficient. It always maintained links with the larger society and with the centers of Indian civilization. And what are the reasons because of which they have ties with the other nearby villages or towns or cities is through migration of people. So you can find that people from one village will move up to the nearby towns or cities like that for migration purposes. Okay, so in search of jobs, in search of education, for marriage, especially the practice of village exogamy. What do we mean by village exogamy? You can find village exogamy in in many villages in North India, especially like in Haryana, wherein the girls and boys belonging to one particular village are not supposed to marry because they are considered as brothers and sisters. So if a guy from village A wants to marry, he can only marry girls who are outside of village A, be it from village B, C, D, any of the other village. Same goes with the girls also. So a girl belonging to village A cannot marry a boy belonging to village A. She has to marry a guy who does not belong to their village, who is outside of their village. So this is what we call it as village exogamy. Okay. So because of migration of people in search of jobs, in search of education, and for work, and for trade purposes also, the villages have contacts. They interact with each other. then through village exogamy, through administrative linkages, inter-regional markets, inter-village economic ties, caste network, pilgrimage, fairs, festival and all other activities which serve as bridges which are connecting different villages and with the neighboring villages and the nearby larger society such as the towns and cities. Don't worry, slowly I will be explaining each one of them in detail. So, in the year 1953-54, Robert Redfield, Mickey Marriott and Milton Singer organized a seminar on Indian village studies at the University of Chicago. So, Robert Redfield, Milton Singer and Mickey Marriott arranged and organized a seminar on Indian village studies during the time period of 1953 to 54. And here to this seminar, they invited 8 outstanding social anthropologists who were doing respective field studies in different villages in India. Okay. So, these 3 people organized a seminar on Indian village studies in the University of Chicago, and for this seminar they invited 8 outstanding social anthropologists who were doing village studies in different villages in our country. So, during this seminar, there were 2 important questions which were posed to these outstanding 8 Indian social anthropologists. Okay. So, in this seminar, they asked the social anthropologists who were doing village studies in our country to address 2 important questions. The first one was, to what extent is the Indian village an isolated and self-sufficient little community? Right? So, I already told you the earlier 19th century anthropologists proposed Indian villages as closed communities, as independent, self-sufficient, and they do not have any interactions or ties with the nearby surrounding villages, neighboring villages and so on. So now in this seminar, this question was posed to the outstanding Indian anthropologists. So they asked them, to what extent are Indian villages isolated? Is it true that Indian villages are isolated? And to what extent is their isolation? And are they really self-sufficient little communities? Just like how our earlier 19th century anthropologists proposed. Got it? Are you all following? Okay. So, earlier 19th century anthropologists, they proposed and they gave a image of Indian villages such that they are independent, self-sufficient, they do not have any ties with the neighboring villages, they are self-sufficient little communities. So now in this seminar, they wanted to know if this notion of Indian villages is true. So that was the first question which they asked these 8 outstanding Indian social anthropologists. Okay. So the second question was, what can be learned from village studies about Indian civilization as a whole? Since these outstanding anthropologists were doing village studies in different villages in different parts of our country, they were asked this question, that is, based on the village studies which you are conducting, what is it that can be learned about Indian civilization as a whole? Okay, so these were the 2 important central questions which were to be addressed by these 8 outstanding anthropologists. So, in this seminar, Oscar Lewis presented his paper. Okay. So, in the seminar which was organized by Robert Redfield, Mickey Marriott and Milton Singer during 1953 to 1954, and the seminar was on Indian village studies where 8 outstanding Indian social anthropologists participated. Among them, one was Oscar Lewis. Okay. So in this seminar, they were posed with two important questions, which I told you just now. So now in this seminar, Oscar Lewis presented his paper. Okay. So what he had done was, he had done a comparative study of two villages. One village called Ranikera in India, close to Delhi, and another village called as Morelos, which is in Mexico. So he had done a comparative study of an Indian village and a Mexican village, and what he understood out of that, that is what he presented in this seminar organized by McKim Marriott, Milton Singer and Robert Redfield. Okay. So in this paper, he gives us the differentiation between the Indian village and the Mexican village. Okay, he had done the comparison of the Indian village and Mexican village, and now he presented his study in this seminar. So here he says, actually speaking, the Mexican villages are inward looking. Okay, the Mexican villages are inward looking. So why he says they are inward looking? Because here the people marry within the village. Okay, people marry within the village, and the inter-village networks, that is, they have very less ties with the neighboring villages. Okay, so the Mexican villages are closed systems. They are inward looking. They hardly have very few ties with the nearby neighboring villages. Okay, whereas that is the opposite in case of Indian village, which I will be telling you shortly. So he said that the Mexican villages are inward looking. They marry within the villages, and further the inter-village networks are constituted even if they have any linkages with the nearby villages. It is only because of trade or because of economic ties, but they do not have any cultural bonds like how it is in India. Like, say for example, cultural bonds such as pilgrimage, religious pilgrimage, okay, and then marriage ties based on caste, based on religion. None of these ties are there. Okay, so he said that the Mexican villages are closed systems. They are inward looking, and they have hardly any interactions or linkage with the nearby neighboring villages. And even if they have any nearby linkages, it is solely because of trade purposes. That is all. So he said that the Mexican villages are inward looking. They have only trade relations. There is no cultural bonding, and they are self-contained nuclear groups. Okay. So this is what he said about Mexican villages. That is, I will repeat once again because it is very important. Mexican villages are inward looking. They are having only trade relations, and they do not have any cultural bonding, and they are self-contained nuclear groups. Okay. So the Mexican villages are self-contained nuclear groups or pockets of a small number of villages centrally located within the municipals. Okay. So in Mexican villages, the people are inward looking and marry only within the village, and the inter-village relationships, if they have any linkage with the neighboring villages, it's because of trade, and there is no cultural bonding with the nearby villages. Okay. So now let us see how it is different in comparison to Indian villages. Okay. So in Indian villages, you can find the villages are connected and linked with a number of nearby neighboring villages and towns and cities. It is said that one Indian villages has ties or linkages with at least 400 other villages. Okay, so can you now get the contrast between the Mexican village and Indian village? In Mexican village, hardly one village will be connected with some 3 to 5 nearby villages. But an Indian village will be connected, it will be linked with at least 400 nearby villages or towns or cities. Okay, so the villages in India are connected by complex networks of social relationships based on caste. So you can find that members belonging to a particular caste, a particular community in different villages will be connected together. They form the caste associations when there are any demands or they need certain whatever demands or any reservation or whatever policies or any benefits from the government or from the village panchayat or any other needs for them as a caste or a community, they will come together as a group, they will associate as a caste group and they will take their requirements to the government, isn't it? Yes, we have various caste associations in our country. So whichever region you belong to, you can just recall and see what are the different caste associations that are present in your region, isn't it? So like this, the members belonging to a particular caste or community, though they are living in different villages and towns and cities, they will be linked. They will have links with each other. Okay. Then kinship and marriage. So that is one very important social relation through which the villages and towns and cities are bridged or they are having ties. So in one village a girl might have got, she would have been born and raised in village A, but after marriage she would have moved to village B or C. Similarly, a boy from village D or E, he might have taken a girl from a village B or C in marriage, and that girl would have moved from her parental home to her husband's home, right? So like this, you can find that there are lot number of marriage ties that is connecting the villages and towns and cities, isn't it? Yes. Fine. Then marriage and kinship. So kinship means relatives. We also have so many relatives, isn't it? So through marriage, again, they will have kids and the parental and the maternal, all these relationships again extend further and gives lot of kinship ties. That is relations, relatives ties. Okay. Fine. Through trade, so you can find whatever the produce, be it the food grains or whatever produce that is produced in a particular village that needs to be sold. So we will have brokers or middlemen who take these products from village A and sell it to the nearby town or APMC or whatever nearby towns or villages. So like this, again, the people in that village might need some other products from the nearby towns or villages. So these traders will bring those products from there and supply to the village. So like this, even through trade, okay, through occupation, we can find people migrating from villages to nearby towns in search of jobs, in search of labor, to work as daily wage laborers, in search of better opportunities, be it business opportunities or job, employment, right? Or even for educational purposes also. So Indian villages are not closed system, just like how our 19th century anthropologists portrayed it to be. So they have ties with the nearby villages or towns or cities through caste, through kinship ties, marriage ties, okay, and even administrative. We have the Kisan Sabhas, we have the farmers associations, we have various other associations of people, say weavers association, carpenters association. So like that, if suppose there is a weaving community in one village, and they will have ties with the weaving communities in the other villages as well. So when again, when there is some need, when they want some some needs to be fulfilled by the government or village panchayat or whatever, they will come together, they have associations, and they will put out their needs or the demands to the right authority, isn't it? So like this, even the administrative and political organizations are also linked, isn't it? So even the political, as I already told you, we have various farmers organizations like the Kisan Mahasabha and many other. So very often you can find in cities or you might read in newspapers that there was a rally of the farmers belonging to this particular state. So all the farmers from these regions, they have some needs, so they have marched from their village up to the headquarters of that state, demanding their needs to be fulfilled from the government, like that, isn't it? So like this, administrative, political organizations, all of this from different villages are linked together. Okay, so this is what is called as rural cosmopolitanism. That is, our 19th century anthropologists had a wrong notion about Indian villages. They thought Indian villages are self-sufficient, they are closed communities, and they are independent. They are not connected with any nearby village or town or city. But actually speaking, when Oscar Lewis did his comparative study, he told us, no, that was a wrong notion. Actually speaking, Indian villages are connected to at least 400 other nearby neighboring villages or towns or cities through caste ties, political, administrative, religious, pilgrimage. Religious pilgrimage is also one reason how they are maintaining ties. So suppose there is a huge fair or a festival or some particular god Rath Yatra or some huge temple festival or a car festival which is happening in one village, you can see that people from all the nearby villages and towns will flock to that village to witness that and take the blessings of God, isn't it? Yes. So there are various yatras, various yatras, pilgrimage, and various religious activities which happen in different villages, and people from all the nearby surrounding villages will participate in that, isn't it? So like this, through religious pilgrimage, marriage, administrative ties, political ties, Indian villages are exclusively connected to at least 400 other nearby towns, cities, and villages. So Indian villages are not isolated, and every village in India has link with other villages, and this concept was called as rural cosmopolitanism by our Oscar Lewis. Okay, so the land relations, marital relations, religious order, political organization, and business built an extended relationship in Indian villages. And Oscar Lewis called this extended relationship built based on land relations, marital relations, religious, political, administrative ties. He called it as rural cosmopolitanism. Okay, so Indian villages has multiple intervillage networks and lineage ties. Lineage ties means across generations. Okay, that is what we mean by lineage. Lineage means consider your grandparents, your ancestors, first your ancestors, then your grandparents, your great grandparents, your parents, yourself, your children, your grandchildren, all of this, line is called as lineage. I hope you're following, isn't it? We shall be discussing much more in detail in our comprehensive course, so do not worry. So the Indian villages has multiple inter-village networks and linkage ties with over 400 other villages, and this character of Indian villages makes it truly cosmopolitan, and this is what our Oscar Lewis called as rural cosmopolitanism. Okay. So here you can see I have made a diagram so that you can understand better. So here there is a Mexican village. So you can see that Mexican villages are hardly connected to each other. So hardly through political ties or economic or trade or administrative relationships. Okay. They do not have cultural bonding whatsoever, and they marry within the village, and hence the Mexican villages are closed systems. Okay. Closed villages. Whereas here there is another diagram showing you how the Indian villages are connected, how they have ties with the nearby neighboring villages or towns or cities. So here you can see Indian villages are connected to other nearby villages or towns or cities through trade ties, through caste relationships, and marital relationships, that is marriage, land relations, political, political, and administrative, kinship, religious pilgrimage. Okay, so caste, trade. So through various of these ties, you can find that the Indian villages are interconnected network. Indian villages are not an isolated system. They are not a closed system. They are an open system. Okay. So now I will give you one more quick summary of the comparison between a Mexican village and the Indian village. So Mexican villages are closed systems. They marry within the village, okay, and they hardly have any ties with the nearby neighboring village except few trade or political or economic or administrative ties. Okay, there is no cultural bonding like religious pilgrimage or marriage or caste relationships that can be found among the Mexican villages, and that is why we can aptly call the Mexican villages as little communities, isn't it? They are actually the closed system. Whereas on the other hand, we have the Indian villages, which are not closed systems, they are open systems. Okay, they not just have trade and the political and economic ties, they also have various socio-cultural ties which are bonding them together, like the marriage, family, kinship, land relations, caste, trade, religious pilgrimage activities, and so on. Okay, so Indian villages are having lot of socio-cultural ties with the nearby villages or towns or cities, and this is called as rural cosmopolitanism by our Oscar Lewis. Okay, so during the later years, the modernization expanded further and the inter-village and the rural-urban interactions became even more and more. That is, the interaction, with the passage of time, the interactions of the Indian villages with the nearby neighboring villages and towns and cities is becoming manifold. It is increasing, it is increasing many times, or it is increasing multiple times. Okay, this is what he described as rural cosmopolitanism when he submitted his paper in the seminar. Okay. So, despite the increasing external linkages, the Indian village still remains a fundamental social unit, isn't it? Just like how in a human body, the cell is the basic unit of life, isn't it? It is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Similarly, in a society, even now, the village is the fundamental social unit. Okay, and the people living in the village have a sense of common identity and loyalty. We can definitely witness this in our society, isn't it? So I hope you understood this concept of rural cosmopolitanism given by Oscar Lewis thoroughly. Okay, if you have any queries, you can share it in the comment section below. And for much more such interesting lectures, you can also keep checking our channel. And until I meet you in the next lecture with another interesting topic, take care. Bye. Have a good day.